This movie, man. I think out of all of the movies that have been delayed due to the COVID pandemic, this one probably got delayed the longest. Well, I'm not exactly 100% sure, but that's what it feels like. I mean, I remember looking forward to this movie like around a year and a half ago, like sometime around 2020 or something like that, and how excited I was wanting to watch it. And all I knew was that it was a murder mystery case on the beautiful Nile River in Egypt, and that it starred Gal Gadot. Didn't even know that it was connected to the 2017 film Murder on the Orient Express, until just recently. But does it deliver? That's the most important question, and I'm going to say after watching the 1978 original Death on the Nile movie just recently that, unfortunately, it doesn't. Most of the time, at least. Man, I have a lot of thoughts about this one, so much so that I'll be talking about spoilers as well. But that will be towards the end after my official grade of the movie, of course, like always. But anyway, to sum it up, Death on the Nile is set after the events of the Murder on the Orient Express, where Hercule Poirot, a world-renowned detective, travels to Egypt for a well-deserved break. However, a couple's honeymoon is cut short when a murder is found, and Poirot has to use his detective skills once again to find out who had done it. So yeah, here we have another whodunit. Should be fun, right? Well, not entirely. This movie is actually the third screen adaptation of Agatha Christie's novel of the same name, following the 1978 original movie and the 2004 TV series. I didn't watch the TV series, unfortunately, so I can't comment on that. Therefore, I'm only going to stick with the movie comparison, but feel free to let me know, like, if you feel the TV series does any better. But I really enjoyed the 1978 Death on the Nile movie. It was very lighthearted and amusing at times, and it introduces many characters with different situations and circumstances who all have a voice. You learn about their characteristics and certain goals from the get-go and as the story progresses, and it is ultimately a very tragic story. The new one, however, has a more serious tone about it. There's far less joking around, and it overall felt like a less fun movie. But with that being said, some aspects were done a bit better. For example, this modern adaptation sheds light on the backstory of Hercule Poirot a lot more. Like, it seems to celebrate his character a lot more, and the cinematography was also far more gorgeous, as you can imagine, and I'd say the main actors of Gal Gadot, Emma Mackey, and Armie Hammer did a pretty good job at staying true to the original characters. But at first, I was a bit worried because I was like, maybe I shouldn't have watched the original one before this one. I mean, normally I would, but in this type of movie, it's less important because since it is a whodunit, I would have, already knew who the killer was, so there'd be fewer surprises when I watched a new one. But now I think it's perfectly fine because now I know and pay attention and pay like close attention to the key details, like I'm rewatching it and looking for the clues prior, and that's exactly what happened. And so after watching this one, I ended up feeling like the original did a much better job, because this one ultimately felt like a more simplified version of Death on the Nile. While the overall ideas are there, most of it was just executed very poorly. Key scenes are just missing, which could have really informed the audience much more to do with the murderer, for example. And certain characters had far less screen time than anticipated. Yeah, I have to keep it as vague as possible to avoid spoilers, but I'll get to what I mean after my rating of the movie, like I said. But another problem I have with this movie is that compared to the original, the characters just felt much more disposable. They don't get much screen time or conversation time where we are able to learn about them, the characteristics, what they had against certain people, not until way later, and nobody really shined. Other than Poirot, of course, but I just didn't really feel anything for most of the other characters. None of them really stood out to me like most of the characters did from the original, and that's where my main problem with this movie lies. Key scenes and dialogue are just missing. I needed more elaboration, because the conclusion, while the intent of the movie still stays true to the original, just made less sense and was way less satisfying because of this. And I say again, if the original just does it better, what's the point? This movie just felt like a shittier remake, like Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, for example. And while the original movie did a good job at tricking the audience with so many vast flashback examples of what could have gone down, this one just left you in the dark, and there was a lot of talking. And I feel like visuals just do more than words. You know, being able to see examples of what happens. That's why I feel like the original Death on the Nile just did so well in comparison to the other movies following Hercule Poirot. Hercule Poirot. I'm not French, so forgive me if I butchered that name, but I'm trying very hard to get it to how I hear in the movies. But anyway, it is also important to keep in mind that these movies are slow. From both Murder on the Orient Express movies to the Death on the Nile movies, there's a specific pattern to what happens. So yeah, if you're not into that, then these movies aren't for you. They're just really slow paced, and that's just how it goes. I don't think it necessarily makes these movies bad, it's just the way they are. But yeah, overall, a bit of a disappointment. Some important scenes and dialogue just felt left out. Though it was a very beautiful movie and a bit of a different one because it focuses on Poirot rather than some other characters I was hoping it would focus on. More in the spoilers part of this video, but those who have watched this movie and the original most likely will know what I mean. But even though it was largely a disappointment, I do feel like certain scenes do it better, mostly towards the end. I'm going to give Death on the Nile a C+. Now, did I like this more than the 2017 Murder on the Orient Express movie? I'd say about the same. I don't know. It's weird. I honestly found the 1974 Murder on the Orient Express movie very boring. Like, it was just a lot of sitting around and talking, and that Poirot just wasn't nearly as good as the original Death on the Nile Poirot. Though keep in mind that I did watch that movie, the 1978 Death on the Nile, before that one, so I had something to compare it with. And speaking of Poirot, I really enjoyed the chemistry between the original Death on the Nile one and his accomplice, the Colonel. I don't know, I can't really remember his name, but watch the original one, then you'll see. But coming back to what I was saying, I feel like what makes me like these type of movies is really dependent on the journey and the conclusion. For example, I remember how when I first watched it in 2017, I liked everything in the Murder on the Orient Express except the ending and the big reveal, because I guess I was just expecting more. Now, after having rewatched it just recently, it makes more sense and I honestly don't mind it anymore, but comparing Murder on the Orient Express to Death on the Nile, Death on the Nile just has more of an exciting story from what I've seen, so naturally I'm more inclined to rate that more highly. For the original Death on the Nile, that was the case. For this one, not so much. Okay, now for my spoiler portion of this video, let's just get into it. From the get-go, we're supposed to see Jackie and Simon engage, but then it didn't work out and Simon went to go on and marry Lynette for the money. That part in this movie wasn't all that evident. There were some mentions, but I just prefer the original movie where we see Jackie following them everywhere. That was pretty funny. In this one, I expected almost around the same, but it just felt very rushed in that regard. And speaking of Simon and Jackie, at one point between the big scripted shooting towards the middle of the movie and where I believe Lynette's maid died or whatever, there were no mentions of them and they had basically almost no screen time. Like a lot of scenes were just missing, which could have hinted a lot more. For example, no scene where Jackie meets up with Simon and apologizes, where in fact they are just revising their plans. No cobra that nearly kills Poirot that was hidden by Jackie, I believe. And there was not a whole lot of emphasis on Simon's leg that got shot by him. It looked like he didn't even feel much pain or anything. He should be like lying down like in the original. In this one, at one point, Simon and Jackie were almost just forgotten, whereas in the original we had more scenes with them. It felt like that movie was just reminding us that they were there and ever present. There was just not much screen time of the killers, so the conclusion just made way less sense. Like, it made way less sense like when they both killed each other at the very end. In the original, it was because they couldn't leave, they were at a dead end, right? So it was sad and tragic. In this one, I just didn't feel that because it was just less transparent. With all this being said, some things were alright. Like the fact that Bok died, someone who was on the Orient Express as well, instead of someone's grandma. And that factor did make it a little bit more emotional. And the chase scene of Jackie fleeing in the scene of like after shooting him was also more intense, as well as towards the end where Poirot shot in the air and fucking bars, like huge jail bars or whatever, came up taking everyone hostage. So I mean, I feel like a C+ score is actually pretty generous because while some of it was pretty decent, a large portion of it was just underwhelming and disappointing, and that's largely due to the fact that the original just does a much better job at it. I mean, that's all there is to it, to put it in simple terms. In comparison, I would probably give the original Death on the Nile movie an A-. I really did enjoy that. I really did. And I'd say one of the main factors was the chemistry between Poirot and the Colonel. There was a lot of funny moments between those guys. And also the fact that the characters in that movie were far more memorable and felt less disposable. But anyway, that's it, guys. That's it. I'm done. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think down below. Like and sub if you enjoyed. And as always, feel free to check out any of my previous videos. Until next time.